On part one of our two-part episode, we explored two personal stories, two deep dives from a heart level as opposed to a nuts and bolts, this is why this works, this is why it doesn't work focus. And while that wasn't the plan, that became an intentional requirement. There was no way this game could get through the standard A Gamer Looks at 40 formula without just diving in and zeroing in, which is something I think the show does well and relatively unique. But there are 100 different stories about this game, and when I first started recording for this title, as of 2 weeks ago, I did not have enough content. Today, I have way too much. And if you notice the runtime of this episode, we're gonna be here a while. But I think it's worth it. I think the recollections of this game really flesh out what makes it special, especially since it took a long time for this game to really gain traction as a modern-day classic. So let's strap on our bunny ears and dash through Termina as we explore episode 63, Majora's Mask Part 2, The Reluctant Classic.
Young Link returns to your N64 in Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. Trapped in a strange parallel world where Armageddon looms just 3 days away, Link must recover his stolen ocarina to save this world. Now magical masks transform him into creatures of power, while bold new creatures cross his path, charmed with luck, both good and bad. Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask for your Nintendo 64. Time is running out.
When Majora's Mask was released in the year 2000, it was dropped to critical acclaim. Critics around the world praised it as the finest Zelda game ever made, many saying it was better than Ocarina. Right now on Metacritic, it has a 95 out of 100. The lowest score I could find of its time was an 8.3 by GameSpot, and I don't even know if that's modern. And a lot of these scores could be modern day because this game is now a well-beloved classic. Of its time, everyone in the know seemed to adore this very bizarre and strange title. So how come nobody I knew did? It seemed like this game was largely panned by the people in my circle, and while I wasn't really in games that hard during this era, I never thought of it as a classic. I thought of this as the weird side title nobody liked. And if my guests are any indication, that was the prevailing opinion. So let's dive into those first impressions. How did you feel as a young person popping this game into the Nintendo 64, hitting power, and then losing everything? Starting us off is Alan Petrozzi, followed by Greg Seward of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of Genesis videos. After him, Jim of the Drink a Beer and Play a Game podcast joins us for the very first time. We are super excited. He decided to spend some time with us talking about Majora's Mask. Really psyched he's here. Justin of Killer Quail Studios then finishes off this segment sharing his recollections of his first time playing. So Majora, so when I talk about Majora, I have no recollection of it. I know of it in theory and just screenshots and videos and just it being in the stratosphere, in the ecosystem of Zelda games. But you've stated you don't love it. I'm curious why, and kind of what was your introduction to it? And why are you just not a fan?
Well, fair enough. I would say, my first introduction to it was that beautiful cartridge. I will say when it comes to game cartridges and stuff like that, the 90s had a lot of stuff going for it. Translucent plastic and holographic game cartridges for some reason. Were just epitome of bring that back. I don't know how you would, but having a translucent holographic cartridge that shows Link doing really cool stuff, awesome. And when I saw that, I'm like, this game is going to be, there's no way it could be bad. There's no way. Look at all this effort they put into just the cartridge alone.
That's cool.
It requires this expansion pack that came with my Nintendo, with my Donkey Kong 64.
Mm-hmm.
They can only need that unless it's going to be huge like that game is.
It must be 4 megabytes better than originally. That's fantastic.
Can't wait. So I'm like, all right, I give it a go. I turn it on. Immediately, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. A little spoopy, but I'm 10 now, or whatever at this point. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it, game. And I remember it had like this really cool scene, like opening cutscene, explaining how Link, gets to where he is in this forest. In his encounter with the Skull Kid, which was way better than Link running through a field, which was cool at the time, but it's like it didn't tell you what was happening at all. It would, there just wasn't really anything happening. It's just the atmosphere. But anyway, so the game starts. I immediately fell in love with the fact that, for some reason, in this game only, they put variations into jumping. If you like jump in multiple times, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but he does like first a normal jump, then he does a cartwheel,
Right.
then he does a somersault flip and lands it. Done. I'm like,
okay,
I don't know why you needed to do that. It looked amazing. Never done it again. He's never done it again. Never again. Only in that game will you find him doing that. It was cool. And then you do all that stuff. You get into Termina, and you do a lot of the opening to find out, oh, you're on a timer. And I already told you how mad I was just about having to backtrack through one temple to do one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Backtracking the game, where failure and not even failure, just you have to do it. You're gonna have to do some things over and over again in the exact same way. There's even gonna be times where you'll have to wait. And telling anyone to wait at 10 is just telling them to die.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I got turned off that game very quickly.
Wow, interesting. I know the timer would bug, and that's kind of one of the reasons I think I've been avoiding it, is that timer is, and the reason it's very much so in the same vein as what you're saying. In a game that's designed around exploration, to punish me for exploring and pushing in every nook and cranny and corner to see what's there, that's not okay. Like, that's not cool. Don't. Its
proponents will say something to the effect of like, well, I mean, just play it more. Forehead, play it more, and you'll enjoy it more. I'm like, I guess, and they're probably absolutely right. It's just at this point now, I can't. I don't want to do it. I don't even want to try. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it's like at this point, the mangas came out. The adaptation of the entire game is now in a pretty entertaining manga form. And once I read it that way, it's very good. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The Ocarina of Time one, the Twilight Princess one that's I think just finishing up is all great stuff. But once I did it that way and it kind of spoiled everything, side quests and everything related, I was like, all right, well, now you just have zero incentive.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, and that makes a lot of sense. And again, my favorite games are the immersive sim types where your Deus Exes and your Preys and the games that reward you for just poking in the corners and merging gameplay and all that just simmy stuff I just get really into. And I would just hate for there to be this ticking timer saying, nope, don't check that corner because you got to stay on task. It's like Navi. Be like Navi as your boss. Hey, listen, you're spending too much time on that report. No, stop it. Stop bothering me. So it's very interesting that that's what you kind of came away with.
I'm just glad that I was able to let the atmosphere itself. Like, I understood what this game was trying to sell to me very well, and I enjoyed that much of it very well. It was just that game was more of a I'll watch you play a game than I will play it myself game.
What was your take on Majora when it came out? And even maybe that lead up, because they came out pretty close together, if I'm not mistaken.
They did, because it came out in 2000, so it was only like 2 years after, maybe even a year and a half. I'm not sure what month it came out. Yeah, it was about a year and a half after this one. I don't know, like it was such a surreal thing. Although when you think about the history of the series, It wasn't that strange for a Zelda sequel to take a complete left turn, because, I mean, we saw it with Zelda 2. Now, that was well before Zelda was an established franchise, so it's kind of a different situation, because at this point, like, Zelda's Zelda, right? We know what it's supposed to be now. Even when they switched to 3D, they masterfully switched to 3D while somehow retaining the feel of the 2D games, the first and third one anyway. But yeah, I didn't know what to think about Majora's Mask. It was so weird and dark, and you're right, so fast previous to that. Because, I mean, you know, we waited years for a new Zelda at that point. I didn't know what to think of it. It looked supremely interesting, and everything that we were hearing about it, you know, hearing about the time was like, well, how are they going to pull that off? This is really cool. On top of everything else, again, a direct sequel to a Zelda game, which I don't think we'd experienced yet either.
That's a good point. I don't think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, you're literally being thrust back into this world with the same character, but, you know, well, I guess into a different world technically, but the same universe, same character. And yeah, even even turning it on for the first time, and you're immediately turned into, I forget what that character's called, a Deku Scrub.
Yeah.
And you're not playing in any traditional way as Link. It leaves a strange first impression, I have to say.
Right on. And what was your first impression going from Ocarina, to that game?
I thought it was cool. I was a little, I knew it going in, but I was still a little bit bummed going back to Kid Link, especially when you're like a young teen. You're like, you got to be the super cool, you know, the more grown up guy. But you're in your teens, you're thinking you're getting more grown up. It's like going back to a kid. What is this? So I was a little bummed about that, even though I kind of knew it coming. But first impressions, I was like, it looks great. It definitely, even though it reused a lot of assets, it still looked a lot better in a lot of ways. There's definitely more detail put into the world that they were making. Mm-hmm. The moon, everyone remembers the moon. That thing's just looming overhead, scary as hell. Like, that just set the mood for the entire time. And even like that early transformation with the Skull Kid and all, like, it was kind of messed up, especially for if you're an N64 kid and everything's like a little more cutesy than, say, on the PlayStation. So everything just felt a little darker. And then as you're playing, you eventually hit that first reset and you go, oh, I lost everything. Cool.
Yeah. How did that hit you as a kid playing that 7th grade? You know, so you're probably 11, 12, I'm assuming at that point, kind of, sort of. Like, how does that hit you? Because again, just to give you my history very quickly, I didn't play this growing up. I was 20 when this came out. So I was in college already. I was kind of aged out of, I was in a period where I didn't play a lot of games. I was kind of doing college things and radio things, and I wasn't doing that. So I kind of missed out on that whole, on Majora. So I'm playing it now for the first time. And, well, actually not for the first time, for like the second time. Because the first time I played it, as soon as that timer reset, I was like, that's it. I lost all my rupees. I lost all my stuff. I got to redo these things. Nope. No.
Yeah. You know what?
So how did that hit you as a kid?
It might have hit even harder because as a kid, you just go, what? No, my things. That's my stuff. What? You took my stuff? No. So
yeah.
And then you do what you always do, and you just hop right back in and go, all right, I guess I have to find a way to not do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a kid, I could see that being, it's a complete subversion of your expectations because, Ocarina, you get things, you accumulate things, you save your game, you keep things, right? You're acquiring at all times. You're using and acquiring. But you only lose if you fail or run out of things. You don't lose things for no reason. Like, I could see that being like an arbitrary thing that would mess with the kid's mind. Like, hang on a second. I had 30 arrows, 20 bombs, and $100, and now I have nothing. You just arbitrarily just took that away, unless I talk to the creepy bank guy who's super excited to see me at all times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that would be weird. Just, kind of a weird, screw with you kind of. Exactly. It really would.
And then, like, the whole thing of, like, basically the first dungeon, like, I mean, what do you call it? Ocarina did it too, where the first area in is also basically turns into the first dungeon and kind of like a puzzle to get out of there. But this one just seemed like even more like tricky and more nefarious from the start, if I could put it that way. And that was just kind of the whole thing from beginning to end. The whole game's just kind of messing with you a little. But yeah, I start, replaying again and like eventually start figuring it out like you always do. And I start to get a little further in, and I definitely I got decently far into the game. I think I got to like the Turtle Island and the Zora's Lair and all that stuff. And then I just kind of stopped playing for a while. And weirdly enough, I was like playing, and then it just never fully grabbed me. And then eventually, maybe a year and a half later, I finally went back and finished it.
Oh, wow. What made you go back and finish it?
I think I was just bored of playing everything else that I had, because I only got games for like good report cards or stuff like that. Like we didn't have a Blockbuster membership because we're late one time. So my dad ripped up the card. So like, it's not like I could go there and rent games and try new stuff out all the time.
Wow.
So what I had was what I had. Right. So eventually, and like, I was a Star Wars fanatic at that point too. So that ate up a ton of time. But eventually, you get all the medals and Rogue Squadron and Shadows of the Empire and everything like that. Yeah. So I was like, all right, what haven't I played or what haven't I touched? And I was like, you know what? I never finished Majora. Let me just try and go back and do this. And I did eventually beat it, even though I didn't get all the masks. Which, if you look online, a lot of people are like, oh, you got to have all the masks so you can have the super mask to fight the last guy. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't.
I know. I keep hearing that. It seems like the prevailing wisdom is, you need to get everything. Ocarina, you had a great experience with it. You clearly loved it. How did you feel jumping into the world of Majora for the first time?
Ooh, it is a very dark world, and like it used like the initial opening, like with the Deku scrub, like it did used to scare me, because just that scary imagery of the initial like being turned into the Deku, like with like Link running away, like
terrifying. As an adult, it's terrifying.
And it's just sometimes the faces of the Happy Mask salesman is also a little like, eh.
The first 20 minutes of this game are so off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
And just weird and almost surreal. I feel surreal to me. And again, playing it as an adult. Really bizarre. How did it strike you as a kid? You said it was it weird? Was it? Because again, Ocarina, adult Link, you saved the world, yay. Now you're, child Link again.
Mm-hmm.
You're riding through the mist and everything's great. You got a horse, a sword, a shield, yay. And then all of a sudden, within 10 minutes, you have nothing, and you're this weird little scrub character. What did you? What had to have hit you in a weird way?
Oh, absolutely. As I said, it was just dark, scary, creepy. Like it was. I don't know. Like, I hate. Well, I don't like spiders, so the Skulltula is like my natural enemy.
No.
So I've seen so many in like the underground. Like after you get the bomber's password and stuff, like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it just always like, I don't know. It's dark and scary and creepy, but like, I don't know. I kind of like it.
Coming up, Helena returns to the show, followed by the Lord Reverend D of the Rulebooks Anonymous podcast, a brand new friend to the show, Knight Garrett. Super glad he could join us. 2 new people on the show this week. Fantastic. And then finally, Jim returns as we all talk about childhood gifting, disempowerment, and the expansion pack. Wait a minute. What about the expansion pack? Let's find out.
And then, so when Majora's Mask came out, let me tell you, I was so excited. I was watching the commercials for it on the TV all the time, and I was begging my mom, get me this game. And for my next birthday, I was given this present that was wrapped, and it was the size of one of the games. And I was so excited, and I unwrapped it, and it was Donkey Kong 64. I wanted to die.
Oh, no.
I was devastated.
Oh,
and then my brother comes out with another present, and he said, Donkey Kong 64 had a Rumble Pack, and you need that to play Majora's Mask. So the second one was Majora's Mask, and I was able to play then.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, they got me good, yeah.
From defeat to elation. Like that's really, really funny.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. And then, Majora's Mask sucked me in, and that's a whole tale of grief and woe. So I felt even more understood by the world with that one.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, when Majora's Mask first came out was when I was in my senior year of high school, and my friends and I were just hyped to play this. We'd been reading all the articles. I saw this awesome trailer for it on WWF Monday Night Raw, and I mean, we were just stoked. So we had planned it out. I'd gotten a pizza from work. We had purchased the game. We were just going to do like just a massive gaming session until the wee hours of the morning. So my buddy Jeff, he's the one with the N64. He gets the game. He manages to get one of the ones with the golden cartridge. So, I mean, it was so cool to look at. Brings me back to like the early Nintendo days where Zelda was a gold cartridge. Once we got the game, we get everything all set up. We're all ready to play. Not a single one of us had noticed that we needed the expansion pack in order to play the game.
Oh no, I didn't realize that. You need the expansion pack for Majora's Mask?
Yep. The only other game I can think of that had that was Perfect Dark Zero, I think it was. But we were scrambling because at that point, I mean, we'd already made the plans, and then get a call from my buddy Linda. She's heading over to Target to pick up some snacks, and we said, hey, if you see an expansion pack, can you grab it? And she's like, all right, no problem. She managed to find the last one they had at Target, brought it over, and we were able to finally play the game.
Wow. So you were saved
Yes.
at the last minute.
Yes.
That's crazy. As you were talking, I'm looking this up, and the cover art for Majora's Mask says expansion pack required, but it's not there. Oh man. Wow. But you were saved at the last minute.
Yes, I'm very thankful for my friend Linda for doing that, because we were just deflated after seeing that. It's like, how did we miss this? And not a single one of us had an expansion pack because we just didn't play those kinds of games.
Right. Oh, that's so funny. Wow.
Yeah. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask requires the expansion pack to work. This game uses the expansion pack in a way that a lot of games haven't really used it yet. The bosses are more detailed. They'll have a higher polygon count. One boss in particular, the jungle boss, one of the first bosses you fight, if you start beating him, then he calls 6 bugs to his rescue, and so you have that many more things on the screen. We hit him a couple more times, then he releases about 300 butterflies into the air that will attack you. It's really incredible to see all that on screen. Everybody's going to love this game.
So you finally get your expansion pack. You secured it. All the buildup, right? Because you got the game, they have the pack. What was the first impression when you popped it in? Now, mind you, you guys have played Ocarina and whatnot, correct?
We actually did lots of game sessions with that, where we would just kind of trade off who's controlling Link and like pass the controller around, and got pretty good at it, except for the water temple. That just always killed us. Disaster,
yep. Always.
Yep. But with Majora's Mask, one of the first things was just the mask aspect of everything, like turning into a Deku for the first time and learning the new mechanics of that, like being able to hop across the water or using like his little like sap snot ball thingy.
Yeah, the bubble snot. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was really impressed with it, because this is one of the first Zelda games I can remember where Zelda wasn't a main part of it. She was there in the flashbacks when you've finally recovered your ocarina and everything. But just for Link to kind of be out on his own was a big surprise, quite honestly.
Did you play Majora when it was released as a sequel?
Yes, I did. I remember hearing that there was going to be a another Zelda game coming out, and it was kind of sort of a sequel to Ocarina of Time. So my older brother and I, we were very excited about that. We didn't really at first we didn't really know much about it because this was back before you could just Google everything.
Right.
So we were really excited when we first heard that it was coming out. Yeah, we were very, very much pumped because by then we'd probably still already had played through Ocarina of Time 3 or 4 times.
Wow. So you played it through 3 or 4 times, excited about Majora. By the way, this quick back, you as a young lad of 9 or 10, you got through the Water Temple 3 or 4 times in Ocarina?
Oh, absolutely.
Look at you.
I
Well done.
actually don't mind it. Yes, it's tedious, but I don't mind it.
Interesting.
Especially when you get it on the 3DS and the boots are a lot easier to put on.
That's got to be a big deal. Yeah. See, yeah. As of this week, as of today, actually, I released my Ocarina of Time episode, and some of this conversation will end up in a different show. But when you were playing it as a kid, did you think? How did that hit you? If you can think back and remember, because I know 9 is tough. Can you think back and remember how you felt about it? You know, going from a Hero of Time and Ocarina, big expectations, to really a much darker and more personal story in Majora.
Yeah. I mean, being I think about the time that this came out, I was 9 years old, I think.
Yeah.
When this came out. Almost 10. I was like, yeah, I'm this great hero. It's cool to be Link again. Oh, I'm a bush now. This is kind of dumb. All I have is a spin attack. I can shoot bubbles. I hope this gets better. So kind of those feelings still from initially hearing about this game and reading about it a little bit.
Sure.
And kind of the feeling upset that, this game's kind of weird. It's very different from Ocarina of Time. And now I'm playing for the first half an hour of this game as this shrub that shoots bubbles and feeling a little disappointed. I'm like, I hope this gets better soon.
As of this recording, I just released the Ocarina of Time episode, and there's a whole section just dedicated to the Water Temple because it's so infamous and despised. And most people despise it, but you and now one other person, actually, you don't mind it, and I have one other person who actually really likes it. So
really,
yes, it's an interesting little dichotomy there. So back to Majora, it sounds like, all right, so you're excited. Did you receive it upon release? Did you get it for Christmas? Because it was only released maybe a year and a half after Ocarina. It was a really short turnaround.
Yeah, if I remember right, I did. I believe I did receive it. I think for Christmas the year that it came out, or sometime around Christmas or my birthday. I don't remember. I think it might have been Christmas, just because my brother and I were both excited to play it. But at that point, by the time the game had actually released, we'd learned a little bit more about it.
Okay.
And I gotta say, I hadn't played it yet, but my first impression of the game kind of sparked a bit of anger, because I found out you have 3 days to beat the game or everyone dies. But I didn't know about the time reset. So my actual initial feelings about Majora's Mask was I ranted to my brother about this.
Oh no.
I was mad as a 10-year-old.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So let me just kind of hang on this moment for one moment. You didn't know that time reset, or you could restart the timeline?
Yeah, I had.
You thought it was 3 days and done?
Yeah, I had read that, the moon's going to crash in 3 days. You have to go do 4 temples. You have to beat these 4 bosses, and you have to stop the moon from crashing, but you only have 3 days. And I was like, how are you supposed to do that in 3 days? That is absolutely ridiculous. That is ludicrous to think that anybody could do that in 3 days. I didn't know about slowing time down. I didn't know about restarting time. I didn't know about any of it. So my initial feelings was that of a bit of anger.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I learned about it. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I was totally fine with it.
Oh, it's I could see myself in that moment again, just trying that age, just telling all my friends, can you believe it? Using words I'm not supposed to use, just being livid. I'd be livid as an adult. Again, reading something online with no context. Oh, that's so funny.
Yep.
Wow. But then you got the game, you realize, oh, okay, I see what they're
I get multiple chances. I get to do this a lot. Okay.
So what was your take when you actually first popped it in and played it?
Well, so my first when we got it, I was first of all blown away that there was a gold cartridge with like the holographic decal on the front. I was really impressed with that.
Very cool.
So that was really cool because, my Ocarina of Time cartridge was just plain gray and it had a plain sticker on it. I was like, okay, well, that's a really cool feature that they added to that. Make it special. But yeah, when I first got in there and, you kind of see the opening cutscene of Link riding through the woods on Epona, and kind of gives you that feeling of being that kid again at 8 when you first played Ocarina of Time. It's like, oh cool, I get to be Kid Link again. And progressing through the sad bit where you become cursed, you become a Deku Scrub. So the first half hour of the game, you're just on a roller coaster of emotion because you're on this high that you're playing a brand new Zelda game and you get to be Kid Link again. And then he goes through all of these just horrendous. He has the worst day ever, and he gets turned into a Deku Scrub. So you're up on this high, and then you're on this down low, and now you're on this quest to cure yourself. And it's kind of just, you really feel bad for Link in that moment because you can tell he's in a bad spot. He does not feel good.
There is an element of that because I think one of the big themes of the game is, especially up front, you stroll into this dark, misty forest, right? You're Kid Link, right? Which again is a bit of a shock, especially coming from Ocarina.
Yep.
And then you're on Epona, you got your sword, you got your shield, you got your horse, life is good. And then within 5 minutes, you have nothing. Everything is stripped away, like Samus Aran loses her weapons, and you now have nothing. And now you're this awful looking Deku Scrub with nothing but a spin attack, and you're weak and squirrely. Wow. For me, even as an adult, I played it and I'm like, geez, this is brutal. Coming from Ocarina to this game, what a shift.
Oh yeah, for sure. And actually, it's been a long time since I've played Majora 2. I forgot that you almost instantly become the Deku Scrub too.
Yep. Almost instantly. It's within the first, I think, 10 minutes, you become the Deku Scrub, and you're this little shrimpy dude. You're in a city where no one knows who you are. No one cares, even though there are recurring characters throughout the game. And it's this complete disempowerment that's really, I think, powerful. And yeah.
And it's such a tone shift too from Ocarina, because in Ocarina it's like, oh hey, there's Link, he's our friend Link, we're all friends in this town. You walk into town as a Deku Scrub and they're just they're all kind of talking to you like you're a freak. It's definitely not welcoming at all in any way.
No, and it's actually kind of xenophobic.
Yeah.
They really have a pretty brutal prejudice against those creatures and those characters. Yikes. Now that we've got first impressions out of the way, it is time to talk about time, because you cannot talk about Majora's Mask without bringing up the most important gameplay mechanic, arguably in the entire game, the 72-hour life cycle. Starting off the conversation is Christian S. from the Franchise Festival podcast, followed by Lord Reverend D, and then Knight returns to shed some light on this all-important topic. My thing with Majora was always the time loop mechanic.
Yep.
Do you like that, or is that something that you kind of dealt with in order to progress in the story and experience that through the characters?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that, because that is a mechanic that hangs a lot of folks up, and with good cause. It's so central to the game, there's no getting around it. And the 3DS remake, I think, eases it back a lot. It has a lot of nice concessions that make it more appealing, even as the 3DS remake makes certain elements more problematic. Like the swimming doesn't work as well in the 3DS remake. So it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The time mechanic doesn't bother me, but I say that as somebody who enjoys a lot of roguelikes.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah,
that's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea of a failed run or something where I learned a little bit or experienced something, even though my progress was reset, never really bothers me. And I don't really feel that sense of like tension that a lot of folks talk about with the time limit. I just kind of, I accomplish whatever I can in a given run, or I try to go to a certain place, and that's just that. And seeing everything get rolled back, there's almost something kind of poetic about that to me as well. I think it works well with the theme. The theme and the mechanics tie together well in that.
And I think that's a really interesting perspective, because you're saying, as opposed to trying to outrun time, which if you think about it on a very almost philosophical level, you can't.
Right.
You do what you can within the time allowed. I think that shift in perspective would make that game a little more palatable for people like me, who do not like I don't like to do things over in games. Again, I don't mind if it's a fail state or I die to an enemy, I gotta start over. That's a different story. But the concept of having to redo things over and over again, even if they're recontextualized, just kind of grinds at me a bit. Example, this may be a slight spoiler for Bravely Default, but Bravely Default has, towards the middle of the game, you realize you have to do things over and over again.
Yep.
And you have to do them a number of times to get the correct ending. And as soon as I realized that's what I had to do, forget it. I'm done. No, thank you. I'm done. I can't, even though the characters are recontextualized and there's more to it and they make it easy, right?
Sure.
It's not, you're not redoing 15 hours worth of work every time. It still kind of just grinds at me. Deathloop on the PS5, same thing.
Very similar, yeah.
Similar kind of thing. I don't like this. It's different than dying and starting again. It's this recursive nature of doing it again. And I don't know where that line is for me. So I'm going to put that in my brain. It's not about trying to beat the timer or win the timer. It's about just living within the timer and understanding you'll get more time eventually, but do what you can within it. I think that's really interesting. I think
it ties in. It ties in so successfully to the broader themes of the game that all of these people who know that their time is allotted are trying to do what they can with the time that they're given, because none of them can go around and quote unquote finish their stories either, which it ends up placing this really interesting, interesting angle on what might otherwise be a heroic story, but there's very little heroic about Majora's Mask. It's just about working within the constraints that you're given.
I think that is not only scary but poignant, and it is, and that's good. I think, and those things are good to, and it's rare when games get the chance to, especially in that era. You know, we were in the point now of good stories and games. You know, our Final Fantasies were getting more mature, etc. But for a Legend of Zelda game to just sink on that and sit on that and really let the player experience that almost pending grief,
right?
You know, grief for what's coming.
Yes, that's a very tough emotion to nail.
Yeah, that's hard. That's not if. Yeah, we don't want to think about those things. That's our own mortality.
Right.
That's what prevents sleep. So,
sure enough.
That's a very, very interesting take. Speaking of that time loop, how did you take to it when you were younger?
Well, when I was younger, I thought it was a neat aspect. I did like the ability to slow things down, because I'm thinking 3 days, there's no way I can do any of this in 3 days. And learning the Song of Time and able to play it backwards to slow things down so that I could have the time to complete everything, that I thought that was a pretty neat mechanic, because you could also fast forward through time if you needed to, and different things happen during different days. Now that I'm older, I've kind of soured on the whole time travel thing, because it feels like such an easy writing tool that people will throw in. It's like, oh, we'll just solve this with time travel. But in this case, it works very well. It plays well with the mechanics, because you've got 3 days for the moon to fall, and you've got so much to do. You've got so many bosses to beat, so many masks to collect. But I think they executed it very well back then.
And I think I agree with you on time travel stories in general, right? I feel like they are very convenient, and the problem with time travel is that the stories often paper over all the questions. You know, so they really require you to say, forget it. I'm not have to worry about paradoxes or anything like that. We'll just go with it. I think Majora's Mask works well in that regard because it's a very small scope. We're just focused on this one area. It has some sprawling areas to it, but relatively a small period of time that's looping in every 3 days. You can control the speed of it, but you really can't control where you are. And that idea that everything you're doing at some point is going to get erased when you redo that timeline. So does anything really matter what you're doing? And I think, again, after some conversations I've had with other people, the answer, I guess, is up to you. Like, you know, when you save the bag lady and you save the lady from getting mugged so you can buy the bomb bag, right? But you know, the next time it resets, she's going to be in the same situation. Do you save her every time, or do you move on to something else? Because you already have a bomb bag, right? Like, you have this thing now. You don't need to get it again.
Well,
I was
going to say, one of the approaches that I took was once I had finally beaten the last boss, you know, in the temples and everything, the way that I looked at it is a more complete way of finishing the game is that I would go to the third day, rewind time and everything, and then on day one, slow it down and go to each temple, just beat the boss again. Because in my mind, that feels like a more complete way of beating the game, because it's not just like one loop I saved this section, another loop I saved this section. The whole world is actually saved by the time I'm going to fight the final boss. And with some of the side quests, I attempt to do the side quests. Some of them just take way too long.
Oh, but man, they ask you to do a lot with an N64 controller. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
I agree. I totally agree. You know, I think it's interesting. And again, I've only beaten one of the four as of yet. I beat the one. I guess the first one. I guess it's the first one you go to, which is the with the swamp. You know, where you can clean up the water and all. Now, when you restart, because I just did that a couple nights ago and I haven't had a chance to come back to it. When I restart that, or the loop restarts, will that water come back poisoned? Like when I return to it?
It will.
See, man, it's not fun. I'm not doing all that again. But you went that extra mile, and that's interesting. You tried to beat all four and the boss in the same cycle.
Well, if I'm recalling correctly, and again, this has been a while since I played, I think there's like a little teleporter thing at the beginning of the temple, regardless of which loop you beat it in, where it can take you directly to the final boss.
Yes, there is. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that sped things up significantly, just because I'm looking at the world. I'm thinking, man, this is a bummer that this is all still messed up, and I can just go and fight the final boss. But no, I want to fix everything before I go, so I can feel like a hero.
And I think that says a lot about you, like as a person. You took this as, I don't want to leave a mess behind. You know, even though I can finish the game. And again, I don't know if it's required for you to do all that again. I'm still early on in my journey with it. But you felt the need to fix it all before you fixed everything. It's interesting.
Well, as you're journeying through all these different areas, you really do feel for the characters within the areas, like the Goron and the Zora and everything. You feel for their plight and all the crap that they're going through. So at that point, it's like, man, I want to help these people out because this is just rotten. That's how I felt. I was just like, this is more completionist way of finishing the game. And in my mind, it's the right thing to do to help all these different characters before I go and fight the final boss, because I'm also wondering if I just beat the final boss, will that really clean everything up, or are they still going to have to deal with the mess?
That's a very interesting perspective and a very interesting kind of quest to go on almost, you know, to do it that way. I think that says a lot about you probably as a person. the world of Majora's Mask is, I think, extremely rich with flavor. I've said this to other conversations about this. How do you feel Clocktown as just a central hub area stacks up against other type of central hub areas, Kakariko Village and the different Zelda games? And I think this is actually one of the first ones where they actually have that central hub as opposed to different towns or starting towns. Clocktown is, of course, a proper central area from which everything kind of forks off of.
Yeah.
How do you feel that works for the game and in comparison to other areas in other games?
I think it works pretty well, especially considering, just the way that they design the whole world, how Clocktown is centered in the entirety of the game. It's like, Hyrule Castle wasn't in the center of Ocarina of Time. It was off to the end. But like Clocktown is dead center, and how each of the 4 exits leads out to one of the 4 temples that you have to go basically defeat in order to progress the game. So I think that's really cool concept that they basically just like northeast, southwest. Here's your directions. These are where exactly you need to go. It just kind of like the people who built Clocktown, like in the game, they knew that those were like places of power and they were worthy of noting their direction. And I also really just like how it's broken into the different segments and how you can go around Clocktown and you can explore and you can meet all of the people, and you realize that all of the people are people from Ocarina of Time. Mm-hmm. You could go to, games, you could go see the innkeeper, you could go see all these NPCs, and then you start to realize, hey, I recognize those carpenters from Kakariko Village as a kid. I recognize the couple dancing in one of the mini games as the people from Kakariko Village as well. And you start to like realize that these are all people from the other game. What is going on? And it's a little confusing and jarring at first once you notice it.
And it's odd that they're in this place, and it makes it feel very surreal, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if a lot of that was just convenience because of the time crunch. We just got to use some of these assets and make it work somehow. Like the witches. I'm pretty confident the witches in the swamp are in Ocarina, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, they are.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of those kind of similarities for sure. I do want to camp out a little bit on Clocktown and the characters, because the characters in this game, out of any Zelda up to this point, the characters in Majora just feel so alive and wonderful and just kind of rich, full of these cool short stories. Are there any characters in Majora that really strike you as not only interesting in design or in the way that they're articulated or the way they behave, or even just in their short stories that you get to either solve or figure out?
Like I mentioned before, the carpenters, I always thought it was really funny when you start bugging the carpenters and they get all cranky with you and they tell you to basically beat it, and they're yelling at each other and the foreman's yelling at his, slacker carpenters to, get back to work. I thought that was funny that they kind of brought that over from Ocarina of Time, how it was the same kind of relationship. He's the foreman, he's older, he's yelling at the basically slacker teenager guys. But I really liked in Majora's Mask, and I'm forgetting right now what they named her, basically Malon's older sister on her farm.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember her name, what she goes by. Oh, Romani.
Okay. Yep.
I like that in this, she is, well, it's basically kid Malon and adult from Ocarina of Time, but now it's two sisters. They actually took one character and split it into two sisters. So I thought that was really kind of cool. And it's like she's taking care of her younger sister. So I was like, well, now as an adult, I can relate to the responsibility of this character. She has to take care of an entire farm and her sister.
That's a lot.
I kind of like that character too. They kind of turned her. They gave this character like kind of an actual adulthood and an actual responsibility, as opposed to like, the carpenters are still doing their thing. They didn't really change. So now this character is an adult and she has responsibility. Right. She has to take care of animals, and she has to take care of her sister, make sure she doesn't get into trouble. So I've always liked that character too, or those characters.
Ignore the giant moon that's constantly descending upon them.
He's no big deal.
Yeah, it's fine. We got about 2 days to live. It's okay.
Yeah.
I love how every character in this game is dealing with this horror in their own different way. They're all just dealing with this. Either some are panicked, some are just resigned, some are almost ignoring it. It's a really cool way of kind of going through different stages of almost grief. It's a really interesting kind of idea there. Now, I could make a guess what time it is joke, but I guess I just kind of did on the sly, so that still makes me the hack I never wanted to be, but it's okay. We've reached a crucial point in the episode where I shout out my wonderful patrons. Please give lots of love, support, and virtual high fives to the following smashing people: Games with Coffee, Patrice Millette, The Let's Play Princess, BT Goebbels, Ryan Payne, Tim Knowles of The Elitist, Julian of Nerds Without Pants, Seth Sergil of the All End Podcast, and finally Dan of Retro Logic. If you want to join these wonderful folks, please go to patreon.com/agamerlooksit4040. There's only 2 tiers, 2 choices to make. You can't even find a restaurant, a burger shack in town that gives you less options, but more value than you could possibly swing a sword at. Patreon.com/agamerlooksit40 to sign up today. Now that we've discussed our first impressions and some of the other aspects of the game, it's time to talk about the heart of the experience, which are the characters. And if you listen to the previous episode, we went into depth on characters and how much their little side stories and side lives really create the color and flavor of Majora's Mask. But before we talk about those people with all of our guests today, we have to give one special fellow a shout. One wonderful character that easily and unexpectedly and quickly wormed his way into my cold, dead heart. Oh yes, it's Tingle time. Of course it's Tingle time. What better time could it possibly be? I didn't encounter Tingle until right before my last few interviews for this episode. So let's join Knight and Jim as we talk about this strange, eccentric character. And yes, I literally may have to do an episode just on Tingle. I don't know. I kind of love the guy. So I also want to camp out on basically 2 things. We're talking about characters. I want to know if you are Team Tingle, because I am Team Tingle. It's okay if you're not, but I'm curious. What's your take on Tingle? What's your Tingle take?
So when I first encountered Tingle in Majora's Mask, I'm thinking, what in the world is this guy doing? I thought he was the most ridiculous thing. As a kid, I can tell you, I wasn't a big fan of him as a kid. I'm just like, okay, whatever. Sell me my map. Let's go. Come on. But as an adult, I'm like, yeah, you should latch on to that childhood a little bit.
Yeah.
Everybody should be a little bit of a kid inside. Do I think he needs to slack off on his whatever adult responsibilities he has? No. But I can definitely relate with him because he just wants to be a kid from the forest. He wants to have his own fairy. He wants to be that kid forever, which I don't blame him. Honestly, I wouldn't mind going back to the days, or at least having days where I didn't have a billion responsibilities. I don't have to worry about job, take care of kids all day long, and all that stuff. Some days you just want to relax and have some fun. And so that's what Tingle's doing while making a bit of a side hustle selling maps. So good for him.
Yeah.
Being a business.
Tingle.
So I guess as an adult, I guess I'm pro Tingle. As a kid, not so much. I was like, get out of here. Get away from me.
And that's very of the time. And that was the prevailing opinion for the longest time about Tingle, where he's the worst, he's annoying, he's goofy. Why is this guy in a Zelda game? And then you turn around, you look at Wind Waker and all the goofiness in that game, and it's even doubling down on the joyful goofiness. And we can talk about Wind Waker if we have a little more time, but yeah, I am super team Tingle as an adult, and I was surprised to see him here. I didn't realize he was in Majora's Mask. I was like, hey, Tingle, what are you doing on that balloon? Get down from there, silly Tingle. Yeah. I love the fact you're right. He just wants to be a kid in the forest. And I love the fact that his brother, I guess, is in the tourist center of the swamp, who's basically saying, could you see him? Could you please stop already with this? Almost embarrassed. Which I think is a very year 2000 kind of vibe. Because I would like to think we've evolved a little bit as 2023 people, saying, just live your life, Tingle. Live your best life. Yep. You know what? Get your skin tight pants on and your Tingle hat. And I don't know. I'm very taken with Tingle. That should be an episode. Just taken with Tingle. And we just sing his praises for 25 minutes.
Right.
What's your take on, I can't get through a conversation about Majora without asking about, I don't know, I don't want to say one of my favorite Zelda characters, but a Zelda character that everyone hates, or at least used to hate, which was Tingle. Good old Tingle.
Yeah.
Now, what's your Tingle take? I'm going to have a whole section called Tingle Takes.
The Tingle Takes. Hashtag
what's your
Tingle takes? Here's my Tingle take. I didn't hate him. I thought he was fine. Like, of course, I would try to, pop the balloon and all that. You had to pop in and talk to him and all that stuff. Like, he was annoying a little bit, but, like, my favorite game of all time is Star Fox 64. So I spent 100,000 hours sitting through Slippy screaming at me. So Tingle is like nothing.
After you've lived through Slippy abuse, Tingle is just kind of like, he's living his best life. I remember of the era, because Tingle was introduced to Majora. And he was, of course, in Wind Waker, and he's popped up here and there and everywhere. He has his own game.
Yes, he does.
Something, I can't even remember the title of the game. It came up in a conversation, but he has his own game. I remember when Tingle was introduced to the world, all video game magazines, like worst characters list, there's Tingle at number 1 or number 2 of the worst characters. And I wonder if it was just because we weren't as tolerant of other people as I hope we are now. Because I think everyone realizes Tingle's just living his best life. He's in his spandex. He's got his elf suit. He wants to be a fairy. He can't. So he's just living this dream out on his balloon, chilling out. I don't know. I love Tingle. I think we all could use a little Tingle in our lives. Like, can we have a little Tingle in our hearts? Be that free, to be just who we want to be.
We live in an Always Sunny world now. He's the original Green Man.
Yes, he is. He is. He is like the original Green Man. Just, you know what? You're doing you. And Tingle, you keep doing you. I also like if you go to the swamp area, the person behind the counter at the tourist, I think it's a tourist shop, at the tourist area, he's Tingle's brother, evidently. And is he's very embarrassed. If you take a picture of Tingle and show it to, because he's the one who also runs the photography contest. You bring him pictographs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he judges and he gives you whatever for pictures you take. And if you take a picture of Tingle, so you pop the balloon, he drops down, and you just take a pingle. A pingle
of Tingle?
A picture of Tingle. If you do that and give it to him, I think he gives you he might give you a piece of heart or something. He gives you a big deal thing. But then he also says, and if you could just talk to him and tell him to stop doing that, I'd appreciate it. He's all ashamed of his brother or whatever relation it is. And again, as I guess a modern person, dude, don't be ashamed of him. He's just doing Tingle things. It's all good, man.
He means he's just trying to help out.
You're doing shopkeep stuff. He's doing map stuff. Maybe he's just dressed a little different. Hey, you know what? It's different strokes for different folks. So
exactly. Oh, and the name of his video game was Freshly picked, or Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land. Freshly picked Tingle's Rosy. God. Freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land.
That is such a Tingle name. Only Tingle would name a game with such nonsense.
I mean, it fits. It perfectly fits.
Of course it does. It's fantastic. I'm a super team Tingle, and I'm glad that people have really come around on him. I really do. I think, at least.
I also think I've played so little Zelda that I haven't been beaten down by Tingle either. You play him once in Majora, you're just like, all right, this guy, he's the goofy guy. I guess by like the third game, you're just like, all right.
We get it. Tingle, he's here. Yeah, he's in Wind Waker. I know that for sure. And I'm not sure about anything else. I don't remember him. He might be in Skyward. I don't remember. I gotta look it up. Anyway, enough Tingle talk.
Is there ever enough?
Was that? I don't know. I don't know if there is, but unless Tingle's involved, I feel like we really can't get to the heart of Tingle. I want to meet the person who thought the character up. I want to get inside the creation of Tingle.
Say, do you want to though?
You know what? That's true. That's fair. It might be. Yeah, I don't know. Good point. It may be a rabbit hole I don't want to descend into. All of a sudden, I'm involved. There's QAnon, and who knows? It just becomes really weird and uncomfortable. No, thank you. That's fair. Now that we've talked Tingle and I've gotten that out of my system for now, let's take a look at the other masks and characters in Majora's Mask. Starting us off is the Lord Reverend D, followed by Seth Sturgill of the All In Podcast. And then Lord Reverend D, Justin, and then Jim all line up to share their stories and takes on their favorite masks and characters in this extremely charming and oft terrifying game. What's your take on the tone of the game? Do you like the fact that it has that, I guess you could say, darker tone or more somber tone, or do you prefer the lighter notes of kind of earlier games?
Honestly, I like it being darker just because it feels like the game kind of grew up with me a little bit. So I'm older and supposedly wiser, but not really. And I'm finding that life is not always sunshine and butterflies, but this one, it does have that darker tone. But there, like you said, there is that element of hope behind it because Skull Kid is not an irredeemable villain. There is like something there that makes him, I guess a more realistic villain than Ganon, because Ganon was just pure evil for the sake of evil, but Skull Kid, there is more motivation behind there.
Well, that first cutscene where you start learning about Skull Kid's backstory and how he was alone and the fairies found him, and it really does attempt to humanize Skull Kid and give him some complexity, which I think is really interesting. Again, just seeing this for the first time now, and I'm appreciating, wow, I can see what they were trying to do here, and it's actually working really well. Because at first you see Skull Kid, he's just a brat. He's just a petulant little brat. You know, you're zooming in on the moon, and he's, mooning you and making the moon cry and all this stuff. You're like, you little jerk. Like, what the? And all of a sudden you start realizing there's more to it.
Well, and that's true of a lot of kids. I mean, kids will just act out because they want the attention. And in a way, Skull Kid is just like, he's a kid. He's just a kid that is looking for attention. And to him, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. He just wants to be seen and heard.
And I think that's, again, a very human thing, and also links up well with, no pun intended, of course. It also kind of links up well with Link. Because again, you're playing this game through the lens of a child, and I think that kind of that dichotomy a little bit works very well for me. Where you're experiencing this game through the eyes of a child that's completely disempowered, and you have this petulant kid, but like you said, who's just acting out in potentially dangerous ways.
Exactly, and the other thing with Link being disempowered, he's also thrown into a world that's not his own. He might recognize some of the people, but that's got to be terrifying, quite honestly.
Yep. And nobody knows, very few people know who he is, and nobody really cares about the stuff he did in Ocarina. It's a very foreign place almost. Yeah, he's out of his element.
Well, and then when you throw in the time travel aspect of reliving the same 3 days, and all that work that you did to create those bonds is just gone, except for the banker where you're committing massive banking fraud with the rupees and the way he writes on your hand.
I always wonder how he knows amongst all people. Oh, clearly, I've never seen you before, but clearly I owe you money, so here you go. It is kind of massive bank fraud. You're right.
It really is.
Do you have a character in mind that when you think back on your Majora experience that really stands out to you as impactful? And maybe even, I know the overall story arc and the themes of loss and grief and, timelines and such were really impacted you. Were there a particular character or characters that did a similar thing?
It probably is Skull Kid. I love Skull Kid, and I love like the there are really several, but I think that like Skull Kid's sort of story and like the way that his own loss and grief in the game is represented really is impactful to me. Like the whole setup of the game really is, if we go to these 4 dungeons, we can get these like 4 giants and they can be the ones that stop the moon. That's kind of like the big, conceit behind the entire game or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But like the way that feeds into him as a character and the relationship that Skull Kid has with that, it almost like there's a sadness to it. There's a defiance to it. There's like a loss of control. I love that character so much. But I mean, yeah, it's little stuff. I love the moment I was referencing with the Zora character Mikau. Mm-hmm. He's part of this band, this like Zora band, and it's so great. And nice. He, when you encounter him, Link sees him like in the water, like floating lifeless, basically. And you have to, and the game makes you do this. You physically go out and swim out into the water and like bring him to shore. And
wow, that's cool.
Just, it's super cool. And the moment that you have there and kind of the way that he spends the last moments of his life are like super impactful. And, I don't know. There are a million little ones, but I want to speak vaguely because of like spoilers, but yeah. One thing that is also low-key brilliant about Majora's Mask is that because you have that central like mask gimmick and everything, what it means is that the reward for doing things in Majora's Mask is just more Majora's Mask. So like often you will do a side mission or help a character or whatever, and often your reward will be a mask. And it'll often allow you to go down another pathway in another cycle or something. It's almost adventure game-ish, like more than anything else. Like I have this item and now I can go and do this, and I can backtrack and do this with this character because now I have this mask. And I think that's also subtly brilliant about the game.
And I think the masks are really great because, like you said, it recontextualizes things in the world. People will react to you differently based on what you're wearing. Right. I love the animation of him putting on the Deku mask.
So
this
good.
Pained panic. Like it looks like the most painful thing on the planet, putting on that Deku mask, which again is a lot. And also the characters in the game this is the first time. I remember Ocarina having pretty fun characters, but this is the first one that I remember where the characters really felt alive and weird. Like the mask salesman is just bizarre and unhinged. Just unhinged. I posted this on, I think I was on Twitter or someplace else. I came across the hand that wants the toilet paper. What is happening? What is happening in this world? This is great. the guy who's on the toadstool doing this weird dance, and then you put his mask on, and his head is sticking out of your forehead. What is happening? I love it. It's just so surreal, and anything that's kind of it's that surreal note for me is just I'm off to the races on it.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I love like because it does have those little moments of levity and stuff, and you never quite know. Like that's another kind of interesting thing is you never quite know like what you're gonna get with a character when you meet them in this game. You never, because you already have these, especially if you've already played Ocarina of Time, you've already got these kind of like preconceived notions of like what to expect from a character, and basically every time the game flips it on its ear. And like even in a situation like when you go to the Romani ranch in this one, and like even the way that plays out, it's very, very different from Ocarina of Time. They framed them similarly, but the actual events of what happened there are buck wild, and they're like crazy, and I like can't believe that they did it in the way that they did it. So yeah, there's a lot of like cool stuff like that to dig into. I'm excited for you to play more of it.
Awesome. Any other characters that you remember offhand that really struck or stuck with you, either from their story or design or really anything?
This is a very, very minor spoiler just by telling you his name, but there's a long involved quest with a character named Kaffy that was cursed by the Skull Kid. And everything that he went through and everything that you go through to try and help him is, it's masterpiece of storytelling for an N64 game. It's really well done because he is doing his best to try and overcome this curse, but he just can't. And so he relies on Link. And granted, this is later on in the story because you need quite a few masks and powers in order to help him. And this is something that takes across all 3 days. But his plight was just absolutely amazing storytelling for being an N64 game.
Cool. I'll have to look forward to that. I'm not familiar with it. The only curse I've yet to encounter was I just actually last night or 2 nights ago, I forget which, was the spider house where you walk in and there's a dude who looks like just a mangled spider head, which again, really scary. And you have to go through his little thing and defeat 30 hidden bugs. Man, this game loves collecting things, killing things in large numbers. I've noticed that. Hey, let's go on the boat cruise and shoot the witch 20 times. What? 20 times? Oh, and don't hit her 10 times or else she... Boy, let me just say, I am enjoying playing this on my Steam Deck with save states. Let's just say I'm save stating hard on this game, and I don't care. But anyway, this game really seems like it loves its large numbers and repetition, but I guess it's Zelda. That's kind of what it does.
Yeah, they love doing those side quests with all the weird game mechanics. I mean, you could skip it, but then you're just going to be missing a heart piece, and it's just going to be right there on the screen taunting you forever.
Yeah, just always staring at you like you couldn't be bothered, could you? You couldn't be bothered. I'm out there in the world ready for you to take. Oh, that's funny stuff.
Oh, it's so very true, especially with like the shooting gallery games. I was so terrible at those with the N64 controller. Even on my 3DS, I was still struggling with it. But I'm a lot of I'd have to put the game down and then come back later when I wasn't frustrated anymore. But I finally was able to actually beat those.
Mention a few characters. Any other characters that really stand out to you as just either you love their stories or you found them interesting? I know you mentioned the hand in the toilet. Amazing. Amazing. I want to know that guy's story. I want to know everything. How high is your arm? Are you at the bottom of that latrine and your arm is like 15 feet high? Are you really projecting your voice? Is your hand talking? Like, there's so many questions I have about the hand in the toilet.
Yeah. No, I think I do too. It was like I think like the fun. It's kind of the fun of like not knowing, you know. I think that's I don't know, like just that. I think that's what I like about 2 is like there's just a mystery of that game, you know.
It's so surreal and scary. Like the first time you see that mask salesman, I don't know. And since you've played it a number of times, you can maybe clue me in on it. When you're talking to that mask salesman, it feels like everything is a jump cut. Like he'll be smiling, and then it jump cuts to another facial expression, and it jump cuts to something else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if was that my emulator screwing up, or is that how it's actually framed?
Oh, that's how it's framed. It's just
okay.
That's just how the animation is, and
it's
honestly,
yeah,
it makes it more scary because like instead of having like a stand, like it just, I said, him jump cutting like makes it kind of more off. Like horror is like that weird, like it's that weird feeling that just like. It's kind of like the uncanny valley because you know something is real, or because you see something that's realistic, like because it looks off. And the happy mask salesman looks kind of off when he does stuff like that. You know,
it's chaos. It's so off-putting to me. Again, as an adult playing this, I'm looking at this like, is there gonna be something behind me about to jump scare me? Like this is legitimately horror movie. Like pacing and framing. Like this is creepy. And then you put on the Deku mask and it's like as if he's getting an Iron Maiden stuck to his face with his otherworldly scream.
Yeah, the little
it's all deep and bellowy. It's like adult Link in the past, like it's
also good thing if you want to skip that, just double tap the mask button. whatever you map it as the C button.
Oh, really?
You can just skip it.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great. Oh, that's so good. There is a bit of like a delay or like waiting. Okay, come on, mask. All right, I get it. It's scary. He's in pain.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I learned about that because I was just trying to get out of it. Like I was just when I was a kid, I just like double tapped. I was like, oh, you can change masks really fast.
Oh,
Sweet.
It's funny. That's really good. That's very funny. Very good. Yeah, man. Are there any other aspects of Majora that really stand out to you? Music, or we've obviously talked a lot about story, maybe character design, things that really really made it a special experience for you.
Well, I think still going on the same sub stories, little extra. Like the one that you will probably like the most is with Anju and Cafe. That's I'm not going to spoil anything, but it is such a beautiful love story, and like it takes all 3 days. So like it.
Oh wow!
It is a big thing. Like it is such a good little side quest that like I will beat it twice. Like I said, I'll 100% the game, and then I will do that quest again to make sure that is the final timeline
so yeah. That's cool. Oh, that's cool. I am looking forward to that. Yeah, I'm going to do another episode when I do complete the game, and then have probably another series of conversations to just talk about ending stuff and end game stuff, and that we can really have that like bulky conversation. But
yeah,
I've already promised somebody one of my previous guests that I am going to complete this game, and we will have that conversation. So that will happen on a future episode of A Gamer Looks at 40. But for now, I have heard those names before and tied to, yes, this is a required quest to do. So.
Oh, totally. Like, yeah, it is one of the best quests. Like it's one of the most personal little stories of that game. Like I said, there's a lot of personal stories in Majora's Mask, but that is the one.
That's awesome.
I think that was the only part of like being a Deku Scrub that I ever enjoyed, was just like whirling around in the air like that, because like doing your little twirl attack like that sucked. Like shooting the Deku seeds, like that was never great.
No, Deku seeds stink. The Deku bubble. Not good.
No,
it's not good. It's not good. that's kind of last resort projectile weapon. That's the last resort. If everything else is exhausted, we resort to the Deku Scrub bubble, but nothing else to that.
Yeah, but you do everything you can to not do that too.
Yeah, we try not to. We try to avoid it. Are you looking for another podcast to add to the never-ending list of shows you listen to on a weekly basis? Then may I recommend the guys at New Dad Gaming as your next one. By creating 30-minute shows perfect for a dad life, Trevor and Jeff share stories of not only their experiences as older gamers, but the experiences of their kids and how the two things mesh together. If you would like a recommendation of a starting point, may I humbly recommend episode 253, where I submit a story about my new dad toy obsession, the Battery Daddy. I didn't read it. It was read by Jeff and Trevor, and their reaction to my story, I was crying. I almost had to pull over, and not in the like radio shock jockey morning, "Hi, that was so exciting, I had to pull over." No, literally, the way they treated the story and had fun with it was an absolute blast, and I promise you, you will have a blast as well. Check them out wherever you listen to podcasts, New Dad Gaming. Next up, Jim, Christian, and Mike Alberton return to share some memories and recollections of their time with Majora's Mask. Yeah, one of the big things with Majora 2 is, of course, story. That's one of the things most people are gravitated towards. Do you remember much about how you felt about the story of it, the themes that are in the game? Playing it as a younger person, 7th grader / 9th grader, I don't know how, I'm saying insightful, but sometimes those things kind of bounce off, You're like, oh, I'm just playing the game and I'm not thinking about it. But do you have any recollections of kind of how you felt about the story, or even now thinking about it?
You know what? I'm in a weird place with Majora now, and part of me, like, I really wanted to try and put some time in before this, but we're both dads, and so we all know that pain.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Getting time and all that.
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
One thing that's weird for me is I'm kind of in a space now with Majora and Ocarina like I was with Fallout 3 and New Vegas, where as I'm playing them, I'm going, okay, like Majora and New Vegas, to me, like gameplay-wise, they're the superior game. But there's just something missing there, both with like the story and just the set-piece moments, that I almost remember nothing about Majora's story for the most part.
Interesting.
I kind of remember, I remember getting to like the final battle and like the cool scenery of him just sitting under that tree and stuff like that. And I remember going around a couple of the towns and a few pieces of the dungeons, but nothing like Ocarina. I could probably tell you the story for the most part back to front, but
Sure.
Majora, for whatever reason, just never stuck with me, any of the story elements.
I think that's really interesting because Majora has big moments. And again, I'm not all the way through. So far it has these kind of big moments, again, bosses and such, but it's all about the little side stories. Like it's instead of one big novel, it's like an anthology of short stories. And that's what I'm loving about it, because I'm a big Fallout person as well. Like New Vegas, I cannot live without New Vegas. I just adore that game because it's a bunch of these little short stories wrapped around a central narrative. But I think especially in Majora, I think it's a very personal game. And I think for me, at least, I'm really enjoying, the short story of I go to the chicken ranch and there's a guy sitting there bemoaning the fact that he's never going to see his chicks grow up to chickens because he knows in 2.5 days this moon is going to descend, and he's kind of lost hope. And he's just resigned. He's just, all right. And then you can, with a bunny mask, you can run around and turn his chicks into chickens, and he's overjoyed. And then you realize as a human being playing the game, oh, and I'm going to reset time and that's all gone. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
So
it almost adds to the thing too, where it's just like, oh, I did all this work and it doesn't really matter because it's going to reset anyway.
Right.
And this guy's not going to remember it. Again, dark and depressing.
Yeah. It's a very depressing game. And I've talked to some people who do actually find it also rather hopeful in that. And this is just, I'm going to literally steal these lines from another person who I talked to about this at length, was he feels that Majora's Mask succeeds because it teaches people to to love the time they have and do the best you can with the time you have, because you can't save everyone. You can't save every single person. You can't save every single NPC, because if you do, the first thing people do is you save the lady with the bomb bag from the bandit who's trying to steal the thing, right? You do that once, you never have to do that again, because you have the item. Like, you don't lose that item, God forbid. Imagine you have to do that every single time. That'd be terrible.
Oh my God.
Right? So what he thinks is that it's kind of teaching you to say, hey, let me do the best with what I have in the time I have, understanding I can't save everyone. And I think that's actually a really powerful theme. I don't know. For me, that's a really kind of a bit of an eye opener, especially playing it again, like really playing it for the first time.
Yeah, now that you put it that way, that is a really cool way to look at it. Because, like you said, we only have 3 days to work. So basically, anytime you're doing a major story element, you're confining yourself to that section. Like, I remember being in the Snowtown and stuff like that, and just going around there talking to everyone there, and realizing, the same thing again. They're making the best of the time they have left, even though they're, in this cold area and there's only so much they can do. So it's definitely a different storytelling mechanic. It's definitely way less hopeful, but way more hopeful. It's a weird one. And like all around, it's a weird one.
But yeah, so I think Majora is just this weird combination of storytelling. And again, I find it fascinating how fast it came out after Ocarina, because there's so many ties to it.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a ton of ties to it. I mean, reusing all the character models and stuff like that, that's a big help. That definitely cut down their development time. Weirdly enough, I don't really remember the music as much either. Like, I know a couple songs translated over, or maybe there was more than even I'm remembering. But again, it's like the soundtrack for Ocarina, like all those little tunes I can hum even to this day. Where Majora, you know what I did in Majora a lot? Maybe it's because I did this. I would just stand there in like all the transformed forms and just zoom the camera in on myself and just dick around with the instruments. So I'll just be like whittling away with like the Zora guitar, just like head banging away and stuff. And I'll do it for a half hour and then completely forget about the song that I'd have to go back and play, where the drums is the Goron and all that. So
cool.
Maybe I did to myself.
You also mentioned Majora's Mask as a game you really appreciated, but you didn't say Ocarina, which I'm curious if you prefer Majora, or maybe they're just, again, companion pieces. What's your take on that bit? Like Majora, you also specified the 3DS version.
Sure.
Right.
So I would say I appreciate Majora's Mask much more than Ocarina of Time, truth be told. Ocarina of Time I really enjoyed when it came out. The 3DS version of it is a really great example of a faithful remake, where it modernizes a lot of good stuff and modernizes the visuals in a sympathetic way, but retains very much the identity and structure of the original. But Majora's Mask just has a lot more character. Majora's Mask, the mechanics are so similar to Ocarina of Time, but it's just so deeply melancholy. Like I come away from Majora's Mask feeling more emotional than I do from most games, let alone Zelda games, which tend to be kind of operating at a pretty like shallow emotional state. Not a mark against them. It's just, they're action adventure games.
Sure.
But Majora's Mask, there's just such a sense of mortality about it. It struck me as a really interesting kind of abstract meditation on how a community confronts its sense of collective and individual mortality. How do these citizens of this town interact with each other when there's this doom coming for them? And how do those different reactions come into tension with one another? I find the entire tone of Majora's Mask endlessly fascinating. It's a world that I love to exist in. Even down to the kind of doomed heroes of each of the cultures in it, right? Their little stories are just heartbreaking. You're just kind of pulled into that world, and it's just endlessly appealing to me.
I mean, they did better. The first 3D game, and I like a lot of the other 3D Zelda games more.
So you like Majora's better than Ocarina?
Yeah, even though Majora is very much a reskin, but yes.
Why is that?
Majora is very weird, and as a kid, I hated it. Thought it was a bullshit Zelda game. And when I replayed it, which is on my early recording, when I replayed it for the show back, and it was like 25 or 26, it really connected with me because it talks so much about grief, and it has just... It's a very interesting concept of what that game is, Majora's Mask, where you go through different events that are happening, how you have to keep repeating days, and it's just a very unique game, and it's one of a kind. It doesn't get as much love as Ocarina of Time does, and I tend to end up liking games that don't get as much attention. Sometimes. I don't know, I think Majora's Mask is just really something else that, to me, improved more than Ocarina of Time did. Because they just changed stuff and they tighten things down. They just put a really weird time mechanic that fucks with you a lot.
And you're okay with the time mechanic? Like that was something that
I am when you have a guide in front of you that tells you what to do, yes.
Oh,
when I played the game legitly, when I first got it for N64 for Christmas for my uncle, hell no, I hated it. Hated the time system, hated everything about the game. It wasn't until years later with the internet and the 3DS version where I'm like, okay, now I'm in.
Now you're good. You can just kind of coast through it. You know what to do during the different time frames. I still have yet to play it. I've played it a teeny bit, and I just kind of bounced off.
You played the 3DS version, but you want to be using a guide that tells you what to do, or you will not find a lot of the secrets or a lot of things you need to know. You just won't know them because the way the game is set up.
Yeah,
Ocarina of Time you can play without a guide and figure out most of the things. Majora's Mask you will not.
Interesting. So it's definitely more, and because it's a little more challenging, and the time aspect, of course, it's just weird for me because I like to explore, and if I have a timer ticking, I can't explore like I want to.
You have to complete certain objectives at a time, and then you explore at other times. That's why you want to use a guide. It's one of those games where you have to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you'll end up exploring, find something cool, then have to reset time and go, and then now know where to go, and that's just annoying.
Mike Alberton recommending a guide to get through Majora's Mask. That blows my mind. I cannot believe that man would ever suggest such a thing. I kid, of course. Play the game the way you want. This is America. And if you're not listening to this in America, then I'm sure it's the same wherever you're from. And I really hope you don't live in a country where they're forcing you to play N64 games without a guide. I hope you live in a regime that's not that oppressive. Okay, hopefully we can all have a laugh at that. Continuing the conversation is Ian, aka TeacherBloke85 on Twitter. He's a friend of the show. You've heard him a number of times before. Followed by Seth Sergil and then Justin. So Ocarina happens, and you're a fan. Obviously, you love it.
Oh yeah.
Soon after, Majora comes out. Now, tell me a bit about your experience with Majora's Mask.
I wasn't expecting Majora's Mask to happen so soon after Ocarina, if I'm honest. But I suppose it makes sense. They'd got the engine there, they'd got the hardware. Why not go for it? I struggled with Majora's Mask. I don't know whether it was the 3-day time loop thing that, in a way, kind of put me off. I don't know, there's something about time loop games, and there's been quite a few of them in the past year as well, with your death loop and things like that. I don't know, there's something about it that fascinates me, but as a gameplay mechanic, it needs to be done in a certain way. And for me, it needs to cut out the repetition. So I'm a huge fan of a game on the DS called 999. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. And that's a beautiful little game that forces you to play through it a few times, but you can skip the bits you've already seen to get to the new bits and find the true ending. If Majora's Mask had been a little bit more kind at the time, I probably would have stuck with it. Now, a lot of the things I'm saying were actually fixed in the 3DS version. So...
really?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, I didn't play too much of the 3DS version, shamefully, but it's the version I will finish, because I know there I can't pinpoint any at the moment, but I know there are a few quality of life updates there that just make it a much easier, much more pleasant play, as opposed to the very harsh version that I found on the N64.
Yeah, I have very similar experience with Majora. Again, I finished Ocarina. I'm like, oh, time to play Majora, right? That's kind of what you do. And I did not like the time loop either. I don't like working against a timer when it comes to games like that, because I want to explore every little nook and cranny and talk to every person. Right? So for me, I kind of jumped off of it. What people have said in the midst of these conversations is Majora is great if you just play it with a walkthrough. Just play it with like a spoiler-free walkthrough if you can find it. Don't sweat having to go through it over and over again. Deathloop is a perfect example. I love that developer. I couldn't get into Deathloop. I just bounced off because I'm like, I don't want to do this over and over again. It doesn't work for me. And even not to be like, slight spoiler alert for those who haven't played it, but I'll wait a second for those spoiler alerts. Bravely Default has a similar mechanic, and I didn't like it. I jumped off. I'm like, don't waste my time. That's the thing, Ian. I don't have time. Don't waste my time.
We're busy doing people at 40 or near 40. We have jobs.
Yes. Did you see the title of this show? A Gamer Looks at 40, now 41. So I got no time to waste on this doing things over. For me, I enjoy playing the original versions of things. Even though I know the 3DS version has a lot of those rough edges shaved off.
Kinda, yeah, okay, a little bit.
Yeah,
it's not as drastic as a lot of people say it is. Because I have since the first thing I wanted to do after finishing the 3DS version was I wanted to play it again.
Sure.
So I wound up playing the N64 version basically immediately after, and then played through the 3DS version again after I played through the N64 version. So I basically played it like back to back to back. And yeah, there are, considerable differences in quality of life stuff. Chiefly the Bomber's Notebook on 3DS will let you sort of track people's position, in the world, and kind of like keep up with their day-to-day schedules and things like that a little bit better. But I think that's probably the number one change. But in other words, the 3DS version I think is easier to beat without a guide. But I think that the N64 version, for many people, just tonally and some of the stuff that it has in the N64 version, I think a lot of people consider that to be like the superior version. I personally, kind of can go either way. I like them both a lot for different reasons. So.
That's what that is.
And I still think it's the most impressive too, because like they only had like a year to do all this.
That's crazy. It's crazy. The turnaround time is crazy. Yeah. Yep.
Like
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I think that's what I like about some games too. Is like, I don't know. To me, like I know a lot of people see like kind of the weaknesses of a console or just old system as like, I kind of like that kind of handicap sometimes people put on like they have to put on themselves, but it's like, it's kind of like Silent Hill 2, the fog was implemented because there's just not a lot of draw distance to it, but the fog makes the environment so much more spooky. And like, that's what's kind of cool about like the older games is like the limitations make like they have to think outside the box. They have to use their heads a little bit more instead of like today. It's like just 4K. Like I don't know. Limitations are nice because it breeds more creativity and more innovation. I guess that's just what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Limitations require you to think, like you said, outside the box and come up with creative solutions. Right? I want. Silent Hill is a good example. We can't draw past more than 15 feet. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? All right, well, we're going to make Silent Hill covered in mist. What is that going to do? It's going to create atmosphere. Ooh, okay, this is actually kind of spooky because you don't. It's a horror game. You don't know what's around any corner. So, yeah, I totally get that. And Majora, with its limitations, these days the answer is just, well, render it. Render it. You have a tool, right? Don't you have a tool to do this stuff with? Sure, we do. But back in the Majora days, you had to come up with creative solutions and do things with characters and story without a lot of facial animations, without, making their hair really wispy and wavy and every hair follicle goes perfectly with the wind. You do it through good story and good writing. And the writing in Majora is fantastic, I think, at least.
Oh, yeah.
Because it has to be. There's no way these stories would work without really good writing. Well then, would you look at the time? Hopefully this episode has flown by for you so fast you didn't realize we were almost at the end, but the finish line is at hand. The moon is coming close, and it's almost time for our cycle to be complete. But before we head off, let's just dive into a grab bag of thoughts and comments about Majora's Mask. This segment features Jim and Knight as they take us home from Majora's Mask. And as we were talking, just to kind of maybe put a quick coda on this conversation, and we can move on to, something else Zelda adjacent. Mm-hmm. I went to look up the release date of Majora's Mask, and in my Shop Majora's Mask ads section of Google, the first thing you see, of course, trying to sell me something, is a pair of high-top sneakers that have Majora's Mask on them. They're like purple with goldish laces with the Skull Kid on the side. Ooh. And I super want those now. I could so use a pair of purple Skull Kid sneakers, although it's from a place called Anime Shoe something. I guarantee you that's not genuine. No chance.
Not a chance.
No way. Hard pass on those. Also, probably on the life side, Majora's Mask for $6 on Etsy. It's probably going to be a hard pass as well, I think.
I think that's probably going to be a thing where you're going to put it on once and it just crumbles as soon as you do it. And you go,
Great. It comes in, it's like paper mache, and it's like 2 sizes too small. It's intended for like a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every time.
Just disappointment. This is a page of disappointment right here. There's nothing good is going to come of any of this. So,
and you know what? It's funny too, because you remember Ocarina had the toy line, it had all this and that, all the merch. Majora didn't really have anything back then, if I'm remembering right.
I don't know. I do remember Ocarina having a bunch of stuff. I don't know if Majora did, but everything looks so painful. Putting on the Deku Scrub mask is literally agony for Link. Literally, like an Iron Maiden mask feels like this unworldly, not from his body scream emanates from the speakers. So I maybe it's just not as fun. I don't know. It's not as fun to roleplay as Deku Scrub, I guess. But yeah. Do you remember how mini game heavy this game is?
Yeah, everything came down to a race or shooting X number of things,
yes.
or a fetch quest or something like that. But it would be a time fetch quest. It was never just easy. It was never just I know I'm going back to Ocarina, but it's the easiest comparison, obviously.
That's fair. No,
but in that game, you just stumble upon stuff. You can just be walking around and pick up a rock, and all of a sudden you just find a heart, or find a secret dungeon, or find something you needed. Here, you had to earn every single thing you got.
Everything. Yeah, it's everything. It's really, really interesting. And I'm not much of a minigame person, so for me, it's been a bit of a downer on the experience. But now I've decided, you know what? If the thing tells me to hit 42 Deku Shrubs in a minute and a half with my bow and arrow for a piece of heart, you know what? I don't need it. It's fine. I can live without it.
You know what? I'll get good. I can do without the one heart. I'll be fine.
Exactly. Me and my save states, we'll show you Majora's Mask. We don't need your stinking mini games. We'll take care of it ourselves. You probably actually should not do that. Another piece of Majora's Mask that actually I was playing it yesterday that really hit home yesterday was mini games. This game loves and I mean loves, its mini games.
Absolutely, it does.
Boy, wow. Do you remember? I don't know. Maybe we had more of an appetite for it when we were younger. I do not have the appetite now to do the ridiculous things those mini games ask of me for, a piece of heart or 50 rupees.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I still enjoy playing the mini games. I think it's actually kind of reversed for me. I didn't like the mini games as a kid. I was like, some of these are too hard. Some of the I forget what they're actually called, but the couple, the dancing couple, how they have their mini game. I could not, for the life of me, do that as a kid. I wasn't skilled enough in my gaming career yet to do it. I always had to have my brother, like anytime I had in any video game, a boss I couldn't fight or a mini game I couldn't get past, he had to do it for me. So as a kid, I didn't like the mini games at all. But now as an adult, I was like, this is kind of just a fun little side thing to do. Just kind of goof off, play some games, throw some bombs, shoot some arrows. Yeah. I think now I like them more just because like I'm playing a game inside a game. How much better does it get than this?
You know what? And it may be because I'm playing this game. I'm not going to lie. I'm playing this game emulated on a Steam Deck. So I am not playing this on original hardware with an N64 controller in my hand. I don't know. Maybe I have to turn down the sensitivity on the deck. I don't know. But boy, oh boy, do I find a lot of those shooting galleries really challenging. And I've gotten the main, a few of them I've succeeded on and got the piece of heart. But I was on this one thing the other day, so yesterday again, where you're at a Deku scrub and you have to like use the Deku flower to float onto different platforms to collect rupees in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And you have to do it across 3 days, which is another thing, which means your entire cycle, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. But you, hero of time, you are going to walk around as the Deku scrub and jump into flowers. And I did the first one. I got like $50 and I was like, all right. And then I like come back tomorrow. Like, wait, what? So I advanced time, come back tomorrow. And now they're moving up and down. And I went at it for about 20 minutes and I could get like maybe one. I said, that's it. That's it. Punching out, Maverick.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? And then I look it up. And the third day is they go up and down and side to side. I'm like, you know what do you, this piece of heart's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Can't 100% it. It's not worth it. No.
So I now realize that this game is just going to be lots and lots of mini games. That some of them are pretty load bearing. You get pieces of heart, like they're not super duper optional. They are, but
yeah.
They're
if
not,
you want 100% it, they are not optional.
And I am not 100%er. As I stated, I am a dad with 2 small children, 6 and 2. I have no time to 100% anything these days.
Same.
Something I haven't really spoken about a lot and I think really needs to be said, because I think a lot of the themes are pretty similar, is the music in Majora. The music in Zelda is universally great. I mean, I don't think anyone would ever argue that. I think that's an inarguable point.
Yep.
But, yeah, man, the music in Majora, is there any themes in particular that really strike you as just awesome?
It's kind of hard for me when it comes to the like music, unless I'm like specifically listening for it, because I get into the adventure and I kind of forget that there's even music. But I can always recall the moments when, as a Deku Scrub Link, you are hearing the Song of Healing playing before you meet the Happy Mask salesman. And I can even picture the moment right now when you're like walking up to him to talk to him and you can just kind of hear the sad, somber music because Link's been brought so low. And it's such a powerful moment because I'm like, this is really sad music. Link's in a really sad place, but at the same time, that sad music is what's going to be his redemption. It's what's going to get him his power back. And I always thought that was kind of cool. It's like sad, somber music, also a way to heal you.
That's a great point. I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's an excellent point. that the Song of Healing, you would think it'd be this upbeat kind of woohoo,
Yeah, exactly.
up tempo, but no, it's not. It's this really somber song. That's really interesting. That's cool. The music I think is far and wide just fantastic. But again, it's Zelda, right? The music in Zelda is by and large just
Koji Kondo, who has done the music for most of the Zelda games at this point, he's a genius. He is amazing.
No question. I wonder if Majora's Mask was my generation's Zelda 2. Because Zelda 2 struck a lot of people the same way and has a similar pedigree now, where in Zelda 2, at the time, a lot of people hated it. It wasn't the Zelda they wanted. Although back in those days, we were used to sequels being different. Mario 2, Castlevania 2. We were kind of used to that. Consistency was not required, but I know a lot of people were really turned off back in those days, and now Zelda 2 is loved by a lot of people. People really, really dig that game, and I think the same thing with Majora. Now I can see as a 9-year-old being like, I don't want to play as this bush. I want to slash things with Z targeting. What am I doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
And now as adults, we're more into it. So did you stick with it as a 9-year-old?
I did. I definitely wrote it out, and I definitely am glad I did, because it turned into one of my favorites. I played a decent amount of the Zelda games. I haven't played all of them, but this, plus I think this is one of my top favorites simply because it was also on the N64. You also play the same Link from Ocarina of Time, so it kind of just like carried over. It's almost piggybacked off of Ocarina of Time as far as like staying up on my list of favorites. Right. But yeah.
Any final thoughts on Majora? And actually, kind of to put a bow on the conversation, you still play this today on the 3DS, and something you pick up every once in a while, just kind of run through again. Why do you think it's held a grip upon you? Why do you think you still feel driven to play this game that you first were introduced to when you were 9? Like, what's that connective tissue?
I think it's because it kind of just ties its roots are kind of tied in with the Ocarina of Time. It's the idea of being the hero that gets to go out and you can do kind of whatever you want. It's open world, and you get to be the hero. In this game is just a kid. You don't even have to be an adult to be the hero. You're just a kid. Right. But it's all kind of tied in with, I started playing video games when I was like 4. I think it was when I went over to some family's house and we played video games for the very first time. So this was like still pretty early in my gaming career, but like at the point where I was starting to take it pretty seriously. So being so close to Ocarina of Time, I was still very much in love with Ocarina of Time. And now there's this brand new game. And so in my mind, it kind of melds together with the Ocarina of Time nostalgia. And if I'm feeling like, I could go for some old school Legend of Zelda, but maybe a little dark. And so I'll jump into Majora's Mask and I'll play through kind of the darker, grittier, more sinister kind of, subtext video game where there's hidden meanings in everything. It's not just you're just a hero. There's a bunch of goofy characters in a town waiting to die because the moon's getting ready to crash into it. There's a lot of hidden things that as a kid I never noticed. And over the years, I've learned a lot about these theories about what actually is going on. And now it's just, and every time I read one of those, of course, it renews the want to play this game. Like, I got to go back and see this now because I've never seen it like this before. So all of that culminated with the, how close it was out with Ocarina of Time definitely is why it holds such a firm grip on me. And I still play it to this day.
I think it's interesting. Majora's really aged well.
It has.
Because I think it's developed, I don't say developed flavor, it's a silly way of putting it, but it's really developed some flavor as people who've enjoyed it have aged and gotten older. They can appreciate this more and appreciate this on different levels, as opposed to, I guess, when you were a kid, it was just another fun adventure, and once you got Link and a sword, you could do things. You weren't a scrub anymore. You could it was just another adventure with a villain and all the rest of it. But I think as adults, I really would encourage people who play this in the past, and especially those who bounced off because of the time mechanic. That was the thing that killed me on it, was the time thing. I was like, I can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. I would really encourage them to give it a try, because I just think life circumstance has made this game that much more richer. And I think it's really cool. Yeah, I think it's really cool that, you know, they made a game that has emotionally stood the test of time, because we've changed with time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Take it from somebody who's playing it for the first time as a 42-year-old adult. Yeah, give it a try. If you haven't played it since you were a kid and bounced off due to the time requirement, give it another try. Guides are extremely helpful. They are okay. We can use those. And if you've never played it before, this is the perfect time, because our life experience fills this game with the color that it's trying to create. I don't think this game had a chance to be super popular upon release. Critics loved it, but critics, by and large, are adults. They probably understood the themes more than 9-year-old you or 20-year-old me. We're still young in our brains. We're still figuring things out. And that's what this game is remarkable for. I think of any game in the Zelda franchise, this is the one that's aged the best. And if you've held off on playing it due to those preconceived notions or old bad memories of not having an expansion pack or being lost in the time loop, then I encourage you. This one is worth going through the cycle over and over and over again. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. We are continuing the Zelda train. It is going to keep on rolling for at least the next month and a half. If you dig this series, there's more to enjoy, and if you don't, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I doubt you're here right now. So if you are, thank you so much for listening. Do all the podcast things, reviews, and ratings on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you listen to your favorite shows and can rate and review a program. Helps so much. Please do so. And of course, follow me on Twitter at AGamerLooks4040. And there's a bunch of cool stuff I think I'll be able to do this year, given the time. So make sure you stay on that. And Discord. Please join the Discord. I'm trying to create a lively environment. I'm also putting some cool stuff on there that's Discord only. So please make sure you sign up via the link tree in my Twitter bio. Thank you again for listening to the show. And until next time, try to live your life in the best way possible, for the great girding moon looms over us all.